Not in the house. Not in the house. I can still remember Mom saying that to us kids. When we were doing some things at home, I remember one time for sure. I think actually the table in the kitchen, it's a pretty good sized kitchen, table was already set for the meal, and my brothers decided to play a basketball game in the kitchen around the table. They had a makeshift basket by the door. And Mom said, not in the house. I think that's one of those lines parents frequently use, right, for their kids, not in the house. A dad in the parish told me a couple of years ago that he observed his two preschoolers walking into the house with something, and they were kind of obvious about the fact that they were hiding something in their pocket. So he followed them into the playroom, and sure enough, they opened their pockets and they spread out these beautiful earthworms that they had found out on the sidewalk. You know, in the spring when it rains and they come up. And the dad's comment was, not in the house. He didn't want to scold them for enjoying earthworms, but not in the house. That's a lesson we quickly learn. Sometimes we don't say, not in this house, not in my house, or as Jesus said, not in my Father's house. And that's what this story is all about. A little bit of background. The temple. I think most of us in the Western Hemisphere, we don't really appreciate the fact that the temple was very, very, very large, and it wasn't a church. It was a series of buildings all connected together with porticos and courtyards. And on a feast like Passover, the people would come from all over to offer sacrifice. And although probably some of them could have dragged their sheep or oxen all the way to Jerusalem, many of them were coming many miles. So what they would have to do is once they got to Jerusalem is they would have to go around to the city, to the various merchants, and buy the sheep that they were going to sacrifice, or buy the oxen, which is a pretty big deal, or even the doves. Well, the merchants probably figured, we're doing these people a favor and making it easier for us ourselves as well if we bring these items right to the edge of the temple. And here's what I suspect happened. They brought them into the very basic area around the temple. And then their competitors brought the same things a little bit closer to the temple. And so they started creeping in a little bit closer. And pretty soon they were in the porticos and they were in the courtyards. And you know how that goes. Competition. And you just try to get closer and closer. Same thing was true with the money changers. We hear about money changers. Yeah, they did have to change money. It's a currency exchange. Because some of the people came from other countries. They used different currency. And some came from countries where the primary currency was that of the Roman Empire, which had the image of Caesar on it. And that was certainly not allowed in the temple. So they had to exchange their currency. In other words, the area of the temple became the shopping mall. It really became where everybody would come, and whether it was convenient or not, suddenly it became big business instead of big worship. And that's when Jesus said, not in this house, not in my Father's house. Now, if we want to apply this today, we don't just think about our buildings, that we could desecrate our buildings, and we could. We don't want to do that. I think the closest I've come so far since we built this church here, this building, is to ask people not to bring their cup of coffee into this house. Very good out there, but not here. But I really think it's more than the church as a building. It's the church as people. And if we had that merchandise sort of creeping in, we have a lot of things sort of creeping into our church as well. And I call it acceptance creep. Things that we start to accept as normative that would have bothered us before. And some of those things could be the clergy, the leaders, the laity. It could be things that people are doing that are really harmful. We're desecrating the church as the people of God. It could be individual parishes that allow one little group to run everything, or a spirit of non-acceptance of other people, or a judgmental attitude, or the little cliques. We've all heard about parishes like that. And that's always been one of my great fears, that we'd fall into those traps or that we'd become judgmental. What's on the outside starts to creep in, and we find it acceptable. Acceptance creep. It's not a good, healthy thing. But Jesus takes this whole image of temple, and it's even more than just the building. He also starts to apply it to himself. And he says, tear down this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. He's basically talking about his own resurrection. We have to look at this in terms of our own spirituality, our own personhood. Because what are we accepting into our lives that would have shocked us 10 years ago and 20 years ago? Somehow, some things we sort of take as normative now. It's creeped in, and we allow it. You've all heard the expression, you are what you eat. And it's not to be taken literally, like if you eat too much pizza, you turn into a big pepperoni. I hope not. But we do know that what we eat makes a difference in who we are. If we're eating a lot of fats and a lot of sugars, that's going to be harsh on us. A lot of the intake of the wrong things makes us weaker and less healthy. On the other hand, nutritious food can make a difference. But it's not just about food. We are what we ingest. We are what we watch on TV. We are what we accept and find acceptable online. We are what we allow ourselves to partake in and day out, and even the same crowd we talk to and the same points of view. We become part of it without even knowing it. And we find it sort of normative, acceptable, when it's not at all. And that's when we have to hear the voice of Jesus. Not in this house. Not in the house of the person we are called to be, the holy person we're supposed to be. Not in the house of the church. This is a message for us. We need to be purified. The third Sunday of Lent is a reminder that we're moving towards Easter, and we've got to leave some things behind if we want to be those newly resurrected people that Jesus calls us to be.